Walter is truly a hero of mine, and he will never waver. And interested in that poll concerning liberals and who's not constitutional, the Constitutional Committee looked at every single congressman in the history of America who held true to the Constitution more than any other congressman since 1789 till today. Ron Paul was one. You should check his number out, okay? Yeah. Let's get that. Thank you very much.
I want to thank everyone that's here tonight, and I will keep my comments to just 3 or 4 points. I'm going to have to study the questions from the general and give him a report in writing. So give me, well, I'll take them home. I like that even better, to be honest with you. I want to start with a quote by Pat Buchanan. I agree with Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul on foreign policy. I think today, with the sadness of what's happening in Iraq, that if we had not removed Saddam Hussein, who was an evil man, we wouldn't have the chaos we have now. If President Obama had not bypassed the Constitution and bombed Libya, yes, Gaddafi was an evil man also, but they're in chaos too. We have created many of our foreign problems today by bad foreign policy. Pat Buchanan's vote is this: is it not senility to borrow from the world to defend the world? I've used it on the floor and I said, is it not stupidity to borrow from the world to defend the world? And the reason I say that, because one of the issues that the General and Greg also talked about is the absolutely uncontrollable debt of our nation. When I saw these 3 babies, 3 boys, tonight, I touched one on the head, and it reminded me of a quote I read that was not my quote, but I read it. If you want to touch the past, you touch a rock. If you want to touch the present, you touch a flower. If you want to touch the future, you touch a child. We are absolutely destroying the future of our nation, and I blame both parties for it, quite frankly. In 1997, General, this is one answer, was the last year I voted for a debt ceiling increase. The debt of our nation was $5.7 trillion. Today it is over $17 trillion, headed toward $18 trillion. We increased the debt ceiling 7 times out of 8 years under President Bush. And we've increased the debt ceiling 5 times in 6.5 years for Obama. You probably know this, but I'm going to repeat it very quickly. When you raise the debt ceiling, you allow our country to borrow more money, Todd, from foreign governments so we can pay the bills for last year. Not this year, but last year's bills. None of us that can do that in our own life and survive for very long. What we did this past December was probably as shocking to me as I've seen. Usually when we raise the debt ceiling, and again, I've not voted for one since 1997, we put a cap to it. This is the first time there was no cap. What the bill said was we will review the debt of our nation in March of 2015. Thank you. I don't know how much we're going to allow President Obama to spend and to waste in that period of time.
Shameful.
I'm pleased to say that the majority of the Republicans voted no to give him that authority. It took the Democrats and a few Republicans to give him that authority, talking about Mr. Boehner, to allow the president to have a blank check. And that's the only way I can say it, it's a blank check. I do not understand how this nation can continue to look the American people in the face and say, we're better. We're not better. Todd and Kelly and the people that have helped you tonight, the Liberty Torch PAC, grow. I am proud to be a Republican, but I'm not proud of where we are today. We need to have the influence of those of us who believe that decisions should be made on the Constitution and not the influence of special interest groups.
That's right.
I have never been as disappointed as I've been in the last 3 or 4 years to see the influence of special interest groups. I did not vote to bail out Wall Street. How in the world can these crooks on Wall Street look their Lord and Savior in the eyes and say, I stole from your people. I put them out of their homes. Manipulation. And yes, you saw it 2 days ago. They have been sued for billions and billions of dollars, but I want somebody to go to jail for what they did. In general, I would tell you that I went to Washington to eliminate the Federal Department of Education. Please don't judge me on my influence because it's still in place. But I tried and will try and will continue to try. I did not vote for George Bush's expansion of the Federal Department of Education. No child left behind. That is just as bad, Greg, as Common Core. It is nothing but the federal government sticking its nose into North Carolina's business. And when you do that, you are threatening education in this state and other states. A couple other points very quickly. I've signed over 11,100 letters to families who've lost loved ones in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, the lady that helps me is from Farmville, Frankie Moy, and she'd been in Colombia, I believe, in one of those countries trying to help with a religious group to build a better world, I guess, and I respect her for that. And we had 11 letters to sign, and I was shocked. I said, Frankie, are you kidding me? No. 11 letters to sign to families that I will do this weekend because I bought the lie from George Bush. I went to Walter Reed 6 weeks ago, right before the August break, because I was told there were 2 Marines from Camp Lejeune who had been severely injured. I have a young man who's in the Army, as an Army fellow on my staff. He's been to Afghanistan 3 times, Dan, so he goes over there with me. We're carried over there by the Navy, and we go into the exercise room, and the first 3 guys we speak to, each one has lost 1 leg. They happen to be from Fort Bragg, and we chatted. Of course, Dan being Army, they had a lot to talk about themselves. One was the colonel who lost his leg as well. Then we go over to the young Marine who's on a exercise mat, probably about as high as your table, and is padded. There's this man who's 20 years younger than I am, with a cap on, with very sad eyes. So when I speak to the young Marine, he's lost both legs and an arm. And we chat. What a neat kid, 23. I asked him, what would you like to do when you finish your rehabilitation? And being from Louisiana, he said, I'd like to start a restaurant, but nobody in Washington knows how to cook Louisiana food. And I thought that was just encouraged him. You know, you will qualify for help from the federal government. You've earned it. But I kept looking at the father's eyes, and I saw the saddest eyes I have ever seen in a man in my life. There were eyes that looked sad, that had worry, and almost tears in his eyes. As we would talk, then I'd look down and talk to his son, kind of like that. Then the last Marine we saw from Camp Lejeune before we left that day came down in a wheelchair. 25, lost both legs. He stepped on a 40-pound IED. Like the 23-year-old from Louisiana, a neat kid, couldn't wait to tell me about his wife and his little girl, 8-month-old little girl. Then I thought about, I asked him, I said, what would you like to do when you finish your rehabilitation? He said, well, I'm going to be here another year and a half at Walter Reed. He said, they've got to rebuild my rectum. Those of you who have served in the military, and those of you who have been to war, you know the pain of war that I would never know. But what so many people do not understand, when they step on these IEDs, it impacts their rectum and their genitals. I worry about how a person's going to feel when I'm dead and gone. We never should cheat them out of one thing. But when we spend all this money overseas, we're cheating our veterans of today. Because America is headed for a collapse. We can stop it. That's why this PAC is so important. We can stop it. But we cannot stop it with politics as usual in Washington, D.C. We cannot do it. Just a couple other points and I'm going to close. This has been a wonderful evening and I'm so excited. I see friends from Dare County, Gates County, and Onslow County, and Wayne County, and Greene County, and also Lenore County, and all over Pitt County, obviously. Something I have never forgotten, and it was not my statement either. I'm good at copying, General, so I might copy your answers for you when we get back to it. And I have to close my eyes to see it. Religion can survive in the absence of freedom. But freedom without religion becomes dangerous and unstable. Dangerous and unstable. We should never forget, and I believe as we all support the Constitution, we all support the words in the Bible. And a nation blessed by God in so many ways is a nation in trouble now because we've forgotten that the strength and the power and the hope is in Washington, is in heaven and not in Washington. And I believe that from the bottom of my heart. Todd, I want to thank you, and Kelly, there's a certain way I close. I want to thank you and everyone that's helped you make this such a successful evening, and everyone that came from outside of Pitt County. Thank you for taking the long trip. I believe sincerely that we are the last hope. And if we do not support the Liberty Torch PAC, then neither party is going to save America. Neither party. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. It hurts me very much to say that, by the way, but I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I have been going to Walter Reed for over 12 years. I've seen the broken bodies. I've met 2 young men, one from Florida and one from Nevada, that have no body parts below their waist. Think about you, male or female, and you have nothing below your waist. But you're living. That's God's will. And yes, man helped that happen, but it's God's will. God will have to take care of the pain of war. As my good friend Ron Paul, and I believe Never again will I send a young man to die or young woman to die unless we follow the Constitution and declare war. Never again. This is my close tonight. I ask God to please bless our men and women in uniform. I ask God to please bless the families of our men and women in uniform. I ask God to please hold in His loving arms the families who've given a child dying for freedom in Afghanistan and Iraq. I ask God to please bless this movement, because God knows better than anyone that our country is in deep, deep trouble. Bless the movement of those who believe in the Bible and the Constitution, please, dear God. God, I ask you to please bless the House and Senate, that we will do what is right in your eyes for today's generation, but tomorrow's generation. And God, your president does not seem to understand or respect you the way I think your president should. I pray, because you can do anything in this world, that you will touch his heart, because he is out of touch with your word and with your Constitution. And dear God, I ask 3 times, God please, God please, God please continue to bless America. Thank you so much. Thank you.